Hola baizoneros y baizoneras, soy Mano, la rueda de moda, 27,5 y en una bicicleta de doble suspensión. Ya no suspensión, y hemos vuelto al tener el modelo que tiene equipamiento de moda, un solo plato, 11 piñones, una transmisión, en este caso de la marca Fórmula, el Racing One, potencia infinita para estos frenos que lo dan todo o nada. Para aquellos que os guste bajar a saco, las en las que todos nos fijamos son las Mavic SLR. Incas a la vez. Es prácticamente imposible romper un radio en estas preciosas ruedas. Mantienen inalterable su estética desde hace ya un par de
Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the... Thanks! Today, top 10 favorite overbuilt knives in existence. I've handled a lot of stuff, right? Look at stuff from the perspective of somebody who's going to use it as a tool and how efficient it's going to be day to day, right? And then I look at other stuff that just has interesting, in some cases, novelty elements that I just like, right? I'm just attracted. We're all like that in one way, shape, or form. My thing has always been kind of more meaty, robust knives. I just like them. I know that there's not really, in a lot of cases, there's not really an argument that can be made for excess durability or capability. More often than not, all I'm doing is weighing myself down to carry the same type of object that also cuts, and in some cases doesn't cut as well. I don't care. I like thick knives. I like meaty and robust knives. Why? I'm not really sure. I think that seed was planted very early on with my venture into the knife world, right around 2010 to 2012, right? So that's just kind of what happened. I've done this list in the past, specifically with budget knives. I've done a discussion topic on it, but I want to share with you guys my favorites. Some of these will be available, and some of them will not. I will link the ones that are available right down in the description, and I'll probably link some of the ones that aren't available right now if I think that they will become available in the future. So make sure that you check out the description of this video. Thank you so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. You can find a link for Patreon down in the description. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. All right, let's start off with some honorable mentions, right? A lot of these you can get right now. One of my favorite overbuilt knives ever is definitely the Cold Steel SR1. And this is the Cold Steel SR1 Lite. If you're on a budget and you're like, I just want a big tank of a knife, right? Oh my gosh, the SR1 Lite is 60 bucks. Yeah, it's only working with 8CR13 MOV. Considering how this knife was made, what it was made to be used for, at the end of the day, if you're really going to go out and beat on it the way that it was meant to be beat on, it almost doesn't matter what the blade steel is, right? Listen, if you care that much, there is an upgraded version of this in S35EN and G10 for much more money. I think it's 160 to 200, depending on which blade ship you get. Comes in drop point and Tanto. Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff that's not available on this list. This knife alone will scratch that itch for a lot of people. I will link this and the more expensive one down below. I'm also going to include, and you're going to see images here of the other knives that are honorable mentions that didn't quite make the top 10. Let's be honest. Cold Steel is kind of the king of overbuilt knives in the $100 to $200 territory. They make a lot of extremely capable, and in some cases excessively capable or unnecessarily capable stuff in this territory. And a lot of this, including the SR1 Lite and the premium version, are utilizing the Triad lock, which is arguably one of the best locks that exists. I'm also going to include the Cold Steel and Demco 8015. That's super cool and has an awesome unique lock, right? Demco invented the Triad lock. He also invented the Scorpion lock. There's no reason that one should be stronger than the other. Absolutely capable. And then also, of course, the Demco 8010 through Cold Steel. That's utilizing the Triad lock. Big, nasty, overbuilt knife. Those are definitely honorable mentions. All Cold Steel stuff, right? And then also the Artisan Cutlery Proponent. This is just, it's a perfect example. Of a knife that is actually not convenient to use at all. It's just neat because it's so stupidly thick. They make, I think what I'm showing here is most likely the brass one, which I think you can get through Smoky Mountain Knife Works. It is so heavy and so ridiculous. It's not comfortable. It's a flipper, and it's actually a liner lock, right? So there's a lot of elements here that don't necessarily translate to actual capability, which again is a theme with this. I want you guys to understand, overbuilt to me just means it's a lot of different elements, but it's not exclusively how capable or durable it is. It's sort of the novelty essence of a big old thick, nasty, meaty boy. That's really all it is, right? So these are all honorable mentions. They're not quite on my top 10, but they're definitely great. And most of these you can get right now. So like I said, check out the links down below. Moving on here, let's get a couple of obvious ones out of the way. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that the Hinderer XM24 is one of my favorite overbuilt knives and one of my favorite knives of all time. This one's in full titanium, making it a true super beast. I've also got, of course, the Dark Horse XM24 in carbon fiber. And then I'll also just, so that it doesn't take up another spot on the list, I'll include the XM18 3.5 inch. The 3 inch is a little small for me, but these knives are all considered overbuilt. Hinderer knives are overbuilt, but they also kind of work, right? Especially the 3.5 inch one. Base weight on the 3.5 inch, something like 5 1/4 ounces. You add a tie scale to it, you're going to increase the weight anywhere from 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce, depending on whether or not it's a milled or unmilled scale. The XM24 comes in at like 7 1/4 ounces. You add a tie scale to it, it's definitely going to be more than that. These are big, thick, meaty boys. 187 thousandths on the spine. I know people are going to aggressively force through in the comment section. It's just really thick on the spine. It's just too thick to cut. I don't understand why anybody never want to buy one of these. Yeah, we know. People who like overbuilt knives are not laboring under any sort of delusion that they've got an advantage in cutting performance. We know. You don't need to tell us. A lot of us just like thick knives because they're thick. They'll still cut. They definitely won't cut as good as an open L, right? It doesn't really matter. I really just don't care. I like overbuilt knives enough to spend multiple hundreds of dollars, close to $1,000 on an overbuilt knife just because that brings me joy. And I've done it many times, as you're about to see. And of course, if you're familiar with my channel, then you know I do this a lot. I just really like overbuilt knives. So yeah, the XM24 and XM18 3.5 inch definitely on that list. Let's get another obvious one out of the way, right? Just so we can move on to stuff that might be a little more interesting. The Demco 8020, the MG 8020, the top one here in titanium, and the bottom one is in G10. Both of these knives have blade stock thicknesses of about 180 thousandths. They are definitely thick. The titanium one definitely gives off like the chunky overbuilt. Like these are, This is the third unique lock that was designed by Andrew Demko, and again, is as strong or stronger than the Triad lock and the Scorpion lock. Those are his words. So yeah, it has the durability and capability essence to it, and it also just gives off that big, meaty, chunky vibe that I like, right? Couple that with the fact that we actually have fidget factor. I mean, there's no overbuilt knife in existence that has the same type of fidget factor as this. And I mean, honestly, I think this is more fidget friendly than any. If you're just attracted to that big overbuilt nature in a knife, the Demko 8020 has that, and then some other magical unicorn stuff that goes along with it. It's just excellent. It's absolutely one of my favorite overbuilt knives ever. Moving on here to number 3, one of the knives that I've been EDCing a lot lately, and that is the Strider 3/4 AR. I've been talking about this so much, how it broke in so unbelievably smooth, despite being, this is built by Medford, but it's a Strider design. You can still buy this right now. It's freaking expensive. $600. This particular version is the S90V DLT Trading exclusive variant, which I will link right down below. Yeah, when I got it, it was tight, difficult to disengage, clunky, awkward, bricky, right? It's all there. But man, once it broke in, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's not an ergonomic masterpiece, right? But it is thick, 187 thousandths. It gives me that feeling of a big, tanky, robust knife. It doesn't carry all that bad. I think it weighs a little over 6 ounces, something like that. If you like overbuilt knives, this is definitely one to add to your collection. US made. A lot of this stuff is US made, right? That's kind of my thing. I like a lot of stuff. I'm not exclusive to any one particular thing, but I really like meaty, chunky US knives. It was a huge bonus that this thing broke in so smooth that I can reverse flick it. No problem. You can also do, you know, the standard, whoops, caught it a little awkward there. You can do the standard thumb flick with it if you can catch that little thumb stud. Well, it's actually an external stop. Or you can use the hole and thumb flick it out, no problem. Or you can Spidey drop it. It's kind of a Spyderco knife on steroids, right? It's kind of a weird genetic experiment with a Spyderco knife. I love this thing. It's really cool. Moving on here to number 4. These are in no particular order, by the way. The Microtech Stitch. I had to include some autos on this list. Not many automatic knives can truly tout that overbuilt title. This thing is definitely overbuilt. 187 thousandths on the blade stock, right? We've got very thick aircraft aluminum. It's one of the hardest firing autos that I have ever felt. It fires freaking hard. Everything on this knife, a lot of the other elements that I love about overbuilt knives are the oversized fasteners. I just love that. Everything about this is just stupidly chunky, right? It doesn't need to be, all these little pieces of hardware don't necessarily need to be that big, but it's cool that they are, right? I will always be attracted to this weird, excessively meaty look, right? This thing's got its own attitude going on, of course, the choil and the harpoon notch, right? Just the blade shape in general. Yeah, it'd be nice if this was manual, right? Like the original, like the freaking unobtainable $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 version from Borka Blades, right? But it isn't. This is the less expensive. This is the more obtainable version. This version itself is very difficult to get. It comes in at about $400. It's American made. I love it. Mainly the reason I'm attracted to it is just because it's stupidly overbuilt for a side opening auto. Ugh, I'll never get tired of that. Love it. Moving on here, let's see. Yeah, number 5. I've always been a fan of this knife. That's the new Chavez 229 Redemption. This is not, the original, or the custom, is definitely a U.S. knife. Ramon Chavez does make knives out of the United States. And the original mid-tech, the 228, was also an American mid-tech, coming in about $500. This guy's made by Riot. Blade stock is a little thinner at about 165 thousandths, but the rest of the knife, the rest of the essence of it was captured, and it's actually a 1/4 inch longer than the 228 mid-tech. So while the 228 mid-tech and definitely the custom, the original custom was like a 1/4 inch thick on the spine. The 228 mid-tech was 187 thousandths. This guy's 165 thousandths, but it's a little longer than the 228. This definitely has all the elements here. We've got big, chunky titanium scales that are not milled out on the inside. It's hefty, right? But you get that Riot build quality. Now, this one, not made in the United States, but they do come in at $350, making it one of the less expensive titanium / M390 knives that are, you know, on this list. Yeah, this whole thing is just like this big aggressive chunk of titanium, and it feels that way. Despite being a little thinner than some of the knives that I've got on this list, it definitely, you pick this thing up and you're just like, God dang, right? It's a little bit angular. It's going to be inconvenient to cut in some situations. Doesn't matter. That's not the criteria. Function is not one of the main criteria here. It's just the essence of being a big, meaty boy. And this is definitely a meaty boy, right? Think what you want about the clip. The new ones in the future will come. I believe you'll have an option to either have the skull clip or not have the skull clip. I like it. I feel like that's a part of the Chavez 229, right? You take that away, and that's going to appeal to a lot, maybe some other people. But when I think of the Chavez 229, that's what I think of first, the pocket clip. And, of course, the massively overbuilt nature. I just love it. Moving on here, a knife that I do not have physically with me, but rest assured, like everything else on this list, I have reviewed it. So you can go back and watch a video of me physically handling it and giving my full thoughts. That's the Microtech Scarab 2. Holy crap. This is such a tank of an OTF, right? The only other OTF in existence that's close to it, and I could almost couple it here, is the Guardian Tactical Recon 40. But something about the Scarab, man, it is just such a tank. This is the newest version of the Scarab. It is longer, at about 9 to 9 1/4 inches overall. It has a thicker blade stock, a way thicker handle frame. I've never handled an OTF that feels quite as aggressive as this one. Does it give you some type of tactical advantage? Is this the best OTF out there? No, in fact, in a lot of ways, it's really impractical for the everyman, right? I'm an everyman. I'm a regular guy. I still like this stuff. I have no specific use for any of this stuff, but I want it because I want it, right? It's just what I spend my money on, what I want to spend my money on. I will own a Scarab 2. As soon as they become a little bit more readily available. Yeah, these are expensive. What are they? $525, American made. Definitely nothing else like this on the market right now. There's a massively there was a lot of confusion about the springs on the inside. The original Scarab had 2 springs. The first run of the Scarab 2 also had 2 springs. What they decided to do was not do that and just add 1 incredibly robust spring. It does have a more robust spring than most, if not all, other OTFs on the market right now. There is nothing on the market that fires like a Scarab 2. You'll hear people claiming, I bought a $100 OTF from so-and-so and it fires just as hard. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I've handled so many different types of OTFs. The junker ones, the high-end ones, right? The crazy custom ones. There is nothing out there that fires as hard as the Scarab 2, and it feels awesome. I love it. Moving on here to number 7. You could say technically I've already put it in honorable mentions, but very specifically this version, the Demco MG8015, the real deal, not the one made by Cold Steel, the MG8015. I actually reviewed a full titanium variant of this, and it was just wonderful. That Scorpion lock does really well with the Cold Steel variant, but it doesn't shine through quite as bright as the true MG8015. Or you could say the true version is the custom version, right? This is the machine ground or ultra high-end American production or mid-tech version of the 8015. This is super, super cool, and it is ridiculously capable. If you're handling this knife with your hand, it will not disengage because of the nature of the Scorpion lock. If you're trying to use this with your foot, I can't really, vouch for that. Or if you're an octopus or something, right? I don't know. But if you hold it with the human hand, right, which is presumably how you're going to be holding it, that Scorpion lock cannot disengage. It's not possible. This is one of the most capable knives on the market. So if you're looking at this list and you're like, I want function with my overbuilt knives, the MG8015. Right there with the Demco 8020. Demco does a good job of combining big, aggressive, overbuilt, in some ways novelty overbuilt, with actual function, right? That's put in there. The MG8015 is a perfect example of that. I love, 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 love this knife. Moving on here, it would be a crime to not include a Cold Steel knife on this list. The actual top 10, not the honorable mentions, the actual top 10. What better Cold Steel knife to make this list than the Cold Steel 4MAX? Oh my gosh. You can get this thing. You can get the original, right? There was an American version of this for like $400. 20 CV in gray G, maybe, was it gray or tan? There was a tan one and there was a gray one. They were both 20 CV or M390. One was $300 and it was Italian made, or maybe $350. And then there was the American one that was $400. And now we have the Formax Scout in OS 10A and Grivery or Grivex or injection mold plastic of some sort. In my opinion, most likely equally capable, other than, of course, the differences in performance with the composition. Once again, keep in mind, if you're really going to take this thing out and beat the crap out of it the way that it's intended to be used, it does not matter what the blade steel is. You're going to be sharpening it at the end of the day, most likely, right? But, you know, think what you will about composition. I will spend more money for a better composition, even if I don't plan to use it, right? The Formax is definitely one of the most aggressively overbuilt, ridiculous. This is a folding, sharpened shovel, is what this is. Impact cutting, chopping, right? I mean, I'm not gonna say Cold Steel's warranty covers this, but prying, listen, if I was gonna pry with a knife, number one, you need a robust, thick geometry. Number two, you need a robust, thick tip. Number three, you probably need the Triad Lock or something that's made by Demco. This thing checks all those boxes, and because of the enormous size, the enormous weight, and the enormous room on the handle, versatility's off the charts. Now, EDCing something like this, pretty much the same for most of the stuff on this list, it's kind of overkill. But gosh, if you're going to go camping or you're going to be outside, you know, for long periods of time, and you're trying to, you know, sort of maximize the versatility of the tools you bring with you and minimize the weight, despite this thing being really, really heavy, it can do a lot of things. It's not the perfect item for every conceivable circumstance, but it'll do a lot of different stuff if you really need it to. You can get the Formax Scout right now. The more expensive ones may or may not be available. I'll link it all down below. Number 9. Yeah, I have to include this on the list, especially considering the new one just recently came out, and it is wonderful. Very specifically, the 2021 Benchmade Adamas in crew wear. What a smart move by Benchmade. God, I love this thing. You guys might be thinking, didn't Benchmade send you one of these? Where is it? Why are you showing a picture? That one got sold to a patron. I will most likely buy it again for myself. I won't have Benchmade send me another. I'll buy one for myself. I love this knife. Shane Seibert design, right? Most of the Shane Seibert stuff through Benchmade is pretty overbuilt. Shane Seibert knives in general are really overbuilt. Big, straightforward, aggressive drop point blade. Huge, meaty handles, right? One of the biggest and most robust axis locks I've ever seen. This is a stupidly capable knife. Yeah, you run the risk of the Omega springs snapping, right? You properly lubricate them, it's less likely that that'll happen, right? I've never actually had Omega springs break. I've been in this game for 10 years. I've never had an Omega spring break, and I own multiple knives that I use with Omega springs, so I wouldn't really worry about that too much. Runs on phosphor bronze, which is great, you know, for getting out in it. The auto one is great too. These are actually a little less thick on both the blade and the handle thickness versus the original, the one that was in D2. But I don't think that matters. The overbuilt nature here is still absolutely captured. The entire thing fills out the hand in a comfortable, functional way. This is one of the knives on this list where if you are really concerned with the functional elements, you're like, I like overbuilt knives, but I still want it to be a reasonable, usable knife. Yeah, the Adamas. And you could toss the mini Adamas in there. It's not truly in the same overbuilt, you know, caliber as the rest of these, but yeah, these are excellent knives. I absolutely love them. Moving on here, I think it would also, I think it would be silly to not recognize this knife. Now, this knife is nowhere near the realm of logical function. I mean, like, it will work, it will cut, right? It will do that. And it is durable, definitely. But as far as convenience, nowhere close, not even on the same planet, if we're going to be talking about convenience. This knife, in many ways, is kind of the king, just because of, you know, it's notorious, right? It was almost, I'm not saying it's the original, I'm saying it's the one that really, it was the one that caused me to gravitate towards overbuilt knives in general. And for a lot of people, it was the same way. Even though most people, you know, I don't know how I ever came into a position where I thought I'm going to fork over the money for this, because it's stupidly expensive, right? Most people will never get their hands on this, but I still have to include it. The Medford Praetorian tie. a 1/4 inch. This is the tie, not the T, the tie, the big boy, the king of the Medfords. A 1/4 inch on the spine. 165 thousandths on the titanium. Oh my gosh, this thing is just a freakish tank. Now look, I know there are makers out there who make bigger knives than this. This is hardly the most overbuilt knife of all time. Number one, I've handled it, which is definitely, part of this list. I have to have handled it and shown a video on it, and I did, right? A lot of people are saying, Anthony Griffith, is it Anthony Griffith? Anthony Griffith? I can't remember. He makes those like gigantic, like stupid hulking tanks, right? Yeah, but are they as famous? Are they as notorious? No, I would say the Praetorian tie is definitely one of, if not the most famous overbuilt knife of all time. I do still like this knife. I'll probably never own it again. I did own it once, and a lot of people, there are still people out there who are like, the Medford only uses D2. I'll never buy one. First off, it was CPM D2 that they were using. It was not the same ingot form D2 that we see on budget knives. And beyond that, Medford now uses a lot of 3V, S35VN. They even use S90V through DLT, right? So the days of that being a thing, that's over. That's a long time ago. If you're still making that argument, you haven't been paying attention. But yeah, I mean, ergonomics, not comfortable. Is it pocket friendly? No, right? It's heavy. It's super thick behind the edge, whether you go with the drop point blade or you go with a Tanto blade. None of that really matters to me when I'm thinking about the Praetorian tie. I just like it because it's such a ridiculous hulking monster of a knife. I just, I can't deny that that's just why I like it, It's probably always going to make this list. I have fond memories of owning it. Like I said, I'll probably never own it again. You can still pick up different variants. Actually getting your hands on a tie, you're probably going to have to custom order one through Medford and wait 6 months to a year, something like that. You can pick up the T, you can pick up the Genesis T, and in some cases the Micro at various retailers. I'll link that stuff down below if you guys want to pick it up. But yeah, even the T being thinner is still a ridiculous hulking monster, right? Anybody who owns the T, if you've never handled the tie, you're probably holding the T right now thinking, I can't imagine something bigger and more insane than this. But yeah, they do exist. But anyways, I think that's going to be about it. I hope that this was mildly entertaining to you guys. That's all it was meant to be. This is just the ramblings of an insane knife enthusiast who has this weird obsession with mega overbuilt and, in most cases, totally impractical knives, right? That's just the kind of stuff I'm into. I know a lot of you guys are too, right? That's probably why you watch my channels, because I cover a lot of this stuff. Please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.
Lately, it seems I haven't been slumming it like I used to, so rest assured, some cheap Chinese crap is coming my way for review. But in the meantime, let's check out some expensive Italian crap with the new Lion Steel SR11 flipper, an updated take on their flipper, the SR1. Sorry, the winner of the Knife of the Year 2017 at Blade Show, and a representation of the evolution of the historic SR1. And you mortals thought it was just a knife. Now, let's forget all that marketing mumbo jumbo by going over the dimensions of this tank, including the overall length and weighteth. Weighet. Looking at the specs, it's a little bit lighter than the OG SR1. The blade length and the cutting edge. The handle size. The grip area. Note I'm talking about the glass breaker thing too on the back. Spine thickness and handle thickness. Tallness closed and how far the flipper sticks out per viewer request. Oh, sorry, fucking flipper. Yeah, it's been a while. Thumbs down are still here and views haven't gone up much, so occasionally I'm going to bring back the cussin'. So I basically bought this because I bought a clone a few years back and I've been feeling real guilty about it after reading that buying gonzos is breaking the law over on, well, you know where. The SR11 has a big blade made from a surely mispronounced by me Sleipner steel. That was my German accent. Remember how accurate it is, right? Which according to marketing materials, a modern update to classic D2 steel because it's tougher, so it's a better fit for, quote, active use. Okay, so now you're telling me people use their super steels. Yeah, right. It's a drop point, flat ground blade with a satin finish. And mine came real sharp out the box. Been a while since I bought a Spyderco, so I've been missing really sharp new knives. I mean, I guess Benchmades aren't bad, but they're no Spydercos. The blade is deployed by a flipper stud, which is an improvement over the SR1 and SR2 if you hate thumb studs. The blade pivots on a ball bearing system, so it's super smooth and easy to deploy. Very tactical. Even for small children. Okay, that was a joke. The thumb stud is also free of any jimping. It's just nice and rounded. You think it really needs jimping, but it don't. And it wears less on your fingers, so you can complain about how your wrists hurt from typing all day at work instead. The blade is locked into place by the RIL, or frame lock. Fun fact, you have to pay a royalty every time you say Reeve integral lock. That's how knife IP works. And it's secured with a roto lock, which is a lock for the frame lock. The tip of the frame lock has a hardened steel insert, so you can replace it in theory, and it's not aluminum, so don't worry about that. Now I actually have another knife that has a roto lock, and longtime subscribers of this channel who probably no longer watch because of the bad words and bad videos will remember that my Little Lion Spy video, a knife that was an experiment between Lion Steel and Spyderco, trying to see how much people might pay for a small, slow-deploying knife with an overbuilt lock. Sorry, I meant collaboration. Now, I was actually kind of hyped for this one because the roto lock on that was strong, and I wanted something bigger, easier to deploy, so this was like the perfect knife, right? And the roto lock on that one didn't even allow the frame lock to move 1 millimeter. Well, not the case on this one. Wah wah. You can move it with your hand when fully engaged. It's hard, but you can still move it. This means nothing to people who treat their knives with care and use it for basic cutting instead of an idiot like me who has that thing for beating on expensive knives with wood. Or the other way around. Now you can see that here, and if you, when I beat it, then tell you it's fair. Also, D10 is sort of strong, but you can fling it all the way open from close if you do this. It shouldn't deploy in your pocket. Shouldn't. The handle is super nice, and my hand fits around it perfectly. It feels perfectly natural, perfectly, and it doesn't even curve to the left. There's zero jimping, and the aluminum handle is machined or 3D printed or forged or chiseled by underpaid workers from a single piece of Valerium aluminium. Well, you can also get it in titanium, but that's heavier, and it's about $150 more. So you're paying for a heavier knife. That sounds like a good idea. And I need more beer, so the titanium folder has to go. Plus, I like looking my age and working on my beer gut. The handle can be had in a few colors, but orange made the most sense to me because it wasn't available in hot pink or zebra stripes with hot pink and alternating purple. It's smooth and has smooth texturing, so it may not fare too well with fish slime or yak blood. The clip is reversible and has that glass brake stud on the back, so you can reach it in your pocket in your overturned car if you need to get out and break the glass, so you don't damage other parts of your knife by hitting the glass with that. It's a tip-up carry only, unless you're MacGyver. The clip is nice and springy, although it may be loose in standard slacks, but not for you 21-ounce denim guys. Modern world problems, right? Spend half a paycheck on a heavyweight slubby Japanese selvage or a dual-lock Italian ball-bearing flipper with German steel. Okay, so I think I went over everything, but let's do a super quick flipper comparison. You're like, oh great, another flipper comparison. You remember the steel will. You're like, yeah, I sure do. I've seen it probably in 3 of your last videos. Maybe 4, maybe 10, I don't know. Oh, okay, well, that's a much smaller knife, and the ball bearing action is comparable to this one, the Lion Steel, and they both easily slide or deploy. Then there's my HEA Designs Poison, also a ball bearing, but it has a more super of the steels, and it's smaller. So there's that. Okay, you know what? You can always go watch those videos. How about the chopping? Let me start out by saying I'm disappointed. I mean, not a whole lot, but I was hoping to beat on this knife and it could withstand a ton of abuse. But as the count stands, my Sebenza frame lock actually was more reliable and the lock failed less. I know, I didn't believe it either. I don't know if mine's slightly defective, my Lion Steel of course. The Sebenza is definitely not. Or the little Lion Spy was well built. The lock failed multiple times because of the slight amount of play when the rotolock is locked. Now the rotolock didn't disengage, it just has play in it. Well, the frame lock has play in it when it's engaged. So it cut my chopping short since it's not really a reliable knife for that. And again, the lock play was there before I started beating on it. You're like, why didn't you just take an axe? Because that's not what this channel's about, okay? Oh yeah, Ben Melanda over on Instagram wanted me to test the tip. Stick it in, wiggle it around, you know, the normal creepy sounding stuff. You won't get me to pry with it, but yeah, that breaks tips. And so far I have avoided heavy duty prying to get the clicks, but I will jab and pull and jab and pull. And if jabbing and pulling won't work for clicks, you know what, then I'll start prying. I'm not at rock bottom yet. So after all of this, well, only a little bit of this, the knife is still ready for cardboard, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Okay, so it's still pretty sharp. Fit and finish on the blade seems nice, except for the lock play. I like it quite a bit, except for the lock play. And I'd be lying if I said I bought it intending to do stuff it wasn't intended for because of the lock. Oh well, if you like this review, subscribe to me here and on the Instagrams. And if you click that little bell right below the video, it'll alert you as soon as my new videos drop. So you can come here and chime in with first, or get to the thumbs down button quicker, whichever. Give me a thumbs up, comment, and don't worry, I promise I'm going to go back to commoner blades for a while, unless people start buying me knives. Or Chris Reeve finally returns my email for free knives. Medford did. I mean, he said no, but he still returned my email.
Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little big, whatever the heck size it is, guy right here. This is the Lion Steel SR11. Well, actually, heck, let's just jump into it. This is, we'll do a size comparison here. First off, Ontario Rat number 2 and your Ontario Rat number 1. So you can see that size-wise, this is not a small knife. And in fact, in terms of blade length, effective use, and actually blade profile, the Rat 1 isn't far off in terms of that. Although blade thickness, the SR is way, way higher. Right here is, of course, your Spyderco Delica and your Spyderco PM2. So there you go, and yeah, I think that'll do it for size comparison at the moment. This is an interesting knife in that this is a relatively, well, it is a newer release from Lion Steel, and it is an update in a lot of ways of one of their older knives, the SR1. The SR1 and SR2, which was the smaller version, which never made any sense to me, but whatever, was much like this guy, an integral handled knife, except it was running using thumb studs and had Teflon washers instead of bearings. And so this is a very much an update of that guy. And so it's something I've been very excited to see. And I was even more so excited after this little guy won the 2017 overall Knife of the Year out of the Blade Show. So this is an award-winning knife right here, and Lion Steel actually won a manufacturing quality award this year too. So whatever it is, there you go. And that's why I picked one up for the channel, and that's why I'm about to do the full good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little Italian knife. Let's go. So on the good side, first off, ding dong, the Teflon's dead. One of the biggest issues that the SR1 and SR2 had was that they were running on Teflon washers. And in addition to giving that a Teflon action, which for me isn't a great thing, it also made the knives a royal pain in the neck to reassemble because you're having to shove Teflon washers into an integral handle. Total pain in the neck. Terrible, terrible thing. Watch my SR2 review for a little bit of a play-by-play on that one. But anyways, I'm really glad to hear that they've moved to bearings on this knife, not only for the action, but because I think it's, well, makes the knife better. Teflon sucks, at least in my opinion. So there you go. Next thing I gotta say that I like about this knife is the roto lock. This little guy right here. This is a way, all you need to do to use this is you rotate this little disc, like so, and then now this lock bar cannot come unlocked. It has put a physical blockage in its place, so this is a lot more fixed bladey than it previously was, and well, I appreciate that. It's not something that I really need very often, but you know, it's a neat little feature, and it's not obtrusive, it's not problematic, it's not going to accidentally get stuck open or closed, so you know, I can't argue. Nice. Next thing, I do gotta say, although the clip bothers me in a couple of ways, the fact that it is reversible without an extra hole is very nice. If you want to reverse this clip for left side carry, all you do is you use the included wrench to spin this little guy right here around. That'll loosen this screw up a little bit, and that'll let you lift this up and then flip it over to the other side, and then there you go. Problem solved. And at that point, it's a lefty-sided knife, although it's still a frame lock, so it's still more righty-friendly, but still, it's a nice approach, and it's a way to get left-hand clips without ugly holes that they needed to put in there, so that's good. Next thing, I gotta say, there are elements of this blade that I love. For instance, this swedge on this blade is just beautiful. For whatever reason, this almost spear-pointy nature of this blade, coupled with this swedge, I just freaking love the looks of this blade. And on the blade, the steel itself is fine. It's using Sleipner steel, which is solid steel, no real complaints with it there. And the sharpening choil on it is also very good. You can see here that the grind has reached its full thickness by the time the choil ends. Nice. Can't argue with that at all. So the blade's very nice. And speaking of that blade swedge, I actually find this knife on the whole very, very beautiful. Very attractive. Not only because of the blade, but even the handle is very nice. The proportioning of the knife is, I just love the looks of this. This is a very pretty knife to me, 100%. Even the way that they did the flipper tab is attractive and nice. So aesthetically speaking, it's very cool. You can also see that the texturing on the handle is very pretty looking. You get like a diamond pattern in the center there, and then you get these little stripes here, and then in the back you get the speed holes on the handle. It's a pretty knife overall. Can't really argue with that whatsoever. Next thing, I gotta say, I like the fact that this is an integral knife. I've been loving integrals lately, and this is a good one. The thing to love about an integral is the simplicity to it. It's not simple to make, mind you, but they are very, very simple to maintain. This knife, well, we'll get back to that one later on, but even still, all you really need to do to disassemble this knife is to slightly loosen this and then unscrew the pivot, pop it through, and then pull the blade out. So this was a 10-minute take-apart knife, and I appreciate that very, very much. You also get a feeling of solidity with an integral knife that's could be entirely made up and in my mind, but by God, it's something I appreciate. So that's a very nice thing. And then finally, I got a comment. The fit and finish on this guy is great. I can tell why Lion Steel won the Manufacturing Quality Award if they're doing stuff like this, because frankly, there are no fit and finish fouls on this knife at all. Everything that they have done here, they've done very, very well. Actually, well, we'll talk about the clip in a little bit there, but Nonetheless, everything, by and large, they have done very, very well here. This is well built as a knife. I like very much that. Don't agree with all the choices, but I like the construction, the implementation. So to me, that's what's good here. It's got very good fit and finish. It's an integral knife. It's a beautiful knife with beautiful texturing, a beautiful blade. It's got a reversible clip that doesn't need a hole on this side. It's got the roto-lock feature, so it's kind of a fixed blade if you need one. You should probably just use a fixed blade. And then finally, ding dong, the Teflon is dead, and that's just a beautiful thing. Let's talk about what's great about this knife. To me, what's great about this knife 100% is the action. This is a flipper knife running on bearings, and it's a beautiful flipper running on beautiful bearings. It feels great to use. The detent is dialed in nicely. It's 100% reliable to open in any position, any size. It's good to go there, except when I slip off the flipper tab, because it's inadequately textured. Hey, I wonder where we're going to talk about that. Maybe later. I don't know. But anyways, moving on. The other thing is that the closure is very nice. It's not completely drop-shotty. I suspect it'll wear in over time, but it is still a very, very smooth action overall. And then I gotta say, the sound on it is pretty great. That's one of those completely absurd things that knife guys love and no one else understands, but the sound of this knife opening is pretty spectacular. And so I gotta comment on the action here, because the action is 100% the greatest part of this knife. Let's talk about what's bad. So on the bad side, first off, unfortunately, disassembly of this knife is a little bit more painful than in most integral knives. And the reason I say that is, you know, in a lot of integrals, all you really have in there are the blade and then the bearings inside the blade. And so you take the pivot out, and pull the blade out, and then to reinsert it, you just put the bearings inside the blade, slide it back in. It's easy, it's fun, it's straightforward. On this guy, there is an extra complication, which is a pair of stainless steel washers against the aluminum here. I understand that they need those washers so that the bearings don't wear a hole in the aluminum, etc. But the problem is that those washers are floating on top of the bearings, but not inside the cutout for the blade, and not inside the handle either. And so you're trying to kind of force those washers in there, well, wedging this open. It's an ugly process relative to most integrals. It's still better than the SR2, which was a circle of hell to disassemble, but I'm still not a huge fan of it. So that's something to keep in mind. Next thing, this is using a convex grind. I'm listing this early in the bad because it's not going to be bad for everybody, but what that means is that instead of being a V-shape edge like on most knives, you have a rounded off edge, kind of like this. I'm not saying it's not sharp, and in fact, this is going to be a stronger edge. It'll be a little more durable for you in the long run, but unfortunately, if you're using a guided sharpening system like a KME, Edge Pro, Wicked Edge, Lansky, etc., you're not going to get a... It's going to be a bit of a pain to maintain a convex edge. You can do it with a mouse pad and some sandpaper. It's not a total loss, but that is something you're going to want to keep in mind. This is convex, and not everyone loves convex. Next thing. The ergonomics on this knife are honestly just not good. You have a very proud clip here. It's sticking up a fair amount and digs into your finger back here. The lock bar on this guy is very high relative to the other side here, which means that that's really digging into my finger here in a way that I'm not super in love with. Similarly, I just don't feel like my hand fits on this knife particularly well. I have smaller hands than most. Maybe a bigger hand would have less of a problem with this guy. But honestly, ergonomically, I don't like this knife. It's not terrible. It's not I'm grabbing a bag of freaking hornets or anything. But it's just not a knife that feels good in my hand. And so that is bad for me, 100%. And maybe a reason to check this guy out in your hand first. Next thing, the lanyard hole on this guy is absolutely a miss. What I mean by that is, look, the lanyard hole is going all the way through the metal here. And that makes sense because the blade is really only going down to about here. So this entire area here exists only to support this damn lanyard hole. And the problem is that area is an ergonomic issue. Had this knife just been rounded off to the end there, I think this would have been a much more, well, would have been a much nicer knife in the hand. And so having that extra area there for the lanyard hole, ugly. Not a big fan of that whatsoever. Lanyard holes are not something I'm in love with generally speaking, but this one particularly is why we can't have nice things. So that's terrible. Next thing, you can see on the top here that there is a glass breaker on the back of this. Now, I'm not saying that having a glass breaker per se is a bad thing, but this positioning was very annoying to me, and also the sharpness of it. And again, a carbide tip glass breaker needs to be sharp. But every damn time I was reaching into my pocket for something, I found myself scratching up my hands on the end of this glass breaker, and it's, you know, it's not a fun thing to have on there. It's just a random sharp tip that probably is never going to be useful for you. I mean, maybe if you're a first responder type, it'll, and you know, in a worst case scenario, it might, but in a worst case scenario, you're going into water, and then you got a whole different set of issues. We'll talk about that in a bit here. But nonetheless, I don't like the positioning of that guy, and I don't like the sharpness of it. Then finally, on the bad side, if you watch my live unboxing video, you'll see that when I first got this knife out of the pocket, the clip was actually sitting way up here. I mean, the clip was positioned about this far off of the handle. And that's not great because it meant that the knife was basically just held into my pocket by gravity, which is not a very secure way to go for it. And unfortunately, the clip itself is just not great because it I see that when I first got this knife out of the pocket, the clip was actually sitting way up here. I mean, the clip was positioned about this far off of the handle. And that's not great because it meant that the knife was basically just held into my pocket by gravity, which is not a very secure way to go for it. And unfortunately, the clip itself is just not very bendy at all. It's just overly thick, and so it just doesn't work well. But I suspect that I readjusted it, and I showed you how in that live stream, where you just flip the clip around, tighten this down, and then use the knife itself as leverage, so to speak. But if you tighten it too much, you can't get it into your pocket and out of your pocket. And if you have it so that you can, there's really not enough tension. It's a badly designed clip, and it was badly adjusted from the factory. But I suspect it's hiding another issue, that this knife is kind of hard to remove from the pocket. And actually, we'll talk about that in the ugly, so let's go there. But on the bad side first, the clip was adjusted badly from the factory, and isn't a very good clip in terms of springiness. The freaking glass breaker is scratching at me all the time. The lanyard hole shouldn't be here and is kind of a mess. The ergos just aren't that great on it. The convex grind is not stellar, at least for me, as a V-grind sort of guy, and they've made disassembly a little bit of a pain relative to most integrals. But let's talk about what's ugly here. Look, two ugly issues with this knife. The first of which is that this knife is really, 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 really slippery. Now, let me clarify here. There are knives out there in the world that are absolutely fine in everyday use, but if you get them a little bit wet or you get them a little bit oily, they become a little bit slippery. That's not a great thing. This knife, though, is always freaking slippery. You don't need to, your hands don't need to be wet. You don't need to have oil around. Heck, you could be in the middle of the Sahara, dying of freaking thirst, with no moisture around. You could be on Tata freaking Ween from Star Wars, and you could be still slipping on this knife. I mean, no freaking sand people fighting over water springs, and this knife is still going to slip out of your hand as you're trying to chase off the sand people. Ugly, 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 ugly. And, they've tried to texture it here, but this texturing is more for the eye than it is for the hand. And all these curves are very gradual and provide nice ramps. Heck, it's a beautiful thing that this flipper tab is hooked, because that's the only damn thing keeping you from sliding up onto the blade. Look, I often will rail against knives for not having way crazy amounts of texture here, but guys, come on. There's no jimping. There's not a damn thing on here. Even the flipper tab is untextured, and you saw me sliding off of that guy. This is just really, really, really ugly in the slippery department, and that has another unintended consequence, which is that because this is a deep carry clip, and the clip is too damn stiff, when you try and pull this out of your pocket, the only surface you can really do, you can grab it like this, but on one side you're on this crowned blade, which, by the way, could have been good. Rounding is nice, but you're on this smooth crown blade on one side, and you're on this smooth surface on the other side, and so more often than not, I'd try and pull this knife out, and because this damn clip is too tight, I'd pull it off, and terrible. And so more often than not, I found myself like pressing the fabric in underneath the knife and kind of lifting it out that way, so I could get past the damn clip. This knife, see, just did it again. This knife is just too damn slippery. Needs a visit from the texturing fairy stat. So that's the first ugly issue. The other ugly issue is that it is just too damn thick behind the edge. I mean, seriously, look at the back of that sharpening choil here to see just how thick this guy actually is. It really, really balloons out to a thickness very, very quickly. So this means this is not a great knife for instance, cutting up an apple. Instead, you're going to pop the apple open. Or cutting paper, cutting thick, hard cell foam. That kind of thing, this is not a great knife for it. I mean, it's a good blade shape if you're planning on bushcrafting with it, but it's on bearings. What are you doing? So anyways, and it's not enough texture to hold it for bushcrafting. So that, to me, is the other ugly issue, is that it's not a great slicer because it's just too damn thick behind the edge. And on a knife with a grind as tall as this one, that was a real supreme disappointment. This could be a great cutting machine, but instead, I just don't get it. So to me, that's the uglies. It's super thick behind the edge, and it is so damn slippery. So anyways, let's go into the final verdict here. Look, for me, my experience with this knife has been kind of like a surprisingly bad first date. I think we've all had this experience where, like, you do an online thing. You see pictures and everything looks great. There's attraction, no problem there. You look at things on paper, like, okay, good job, good education. This is gonna be great. You see him across the parking lot, like, bam, I am super interested. This is gonna be a great date. Then you sit down across the table and you start talking, and within 15 minutes you realize that everything is just subtly wrong. And it's not like your date showed up in a Nazi uniform or ordered cooked puppy or something. It's the little details. Like super loud chewing or something like that. Or you notice a Z-hunter hanging out in their pocket or something like that. They're asking subtle but highly interested questions about the suppleness of your internal organs. Those kinds of questions are the ones that are Details, but they're absolutely, well, disconcerting. And these details may not be on the profile, but when you add it all up, after those 15 minutes of talking, it's wrong enough that there's just no question at all. There will be no second date. No thanks, I am not staying for dessert. Instead, you're just looking to bail. Maybe they'll be great for somebody else, but they are absolutely not for you. And that's me with this knife. Because in pictures and on paper, I was ready for love at first sight, because this is a beautiful blade. Beautiful handle design. It is an integral knife. It's a flipper with a great action. It's got the roto-lock thing. It's got a folding, beefy blade, which can be a wonderful thing. They finally ditched the Teflon. Heck, it was Blade of the Year from Blade Show. And so I was super excited for this date. And I would full hard use edge, maybe, but that doesn't work. And then it's crazy freaking slippery, to the point where it was really annoying on a regular basis. And it's so thick behind the edge that it's just not a great cutting tool. And so the end result of all of these subtle things is a knife that could easily look like the Blade of the Year from across the room. But with these subtle issues, once you get it in hand and spend some time, it is a definite nope for me. I am not staying for dessert. I am not setting up something for next week. And I am sure as heck not putting out for this guy. I am just moving on with my life. My hope is that there will be an SR12 that fixes these issues, that they'll make some substantial ergonomic tweaks. They'll add some actual texturing someplace, making this knife a lot less slippery. Maybe they'll grind it to actually cut things, because I think this knife is startlingly close to being startlingly good. This could be an incredible date. But for now, well, this was a lot of fun. I mean, it was great to meet you, SR11. I mean, seriously, you are one heck of a knife. But, you know, I think our lives are just on two very different paths. You want something different out of life than I do. It's not you, of course. It's me. But I got to work early tomorrow, and I got a long drive back home. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and skip dessert and, well, have yourself an absolutely wonderful rest of your day there, SR11. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting to you. Who knows, maybe it'll be a Blade of the Year for you, but no, thank you for me. Hope this has been interesting. Have yourselves a wonderful one. Bye now. Hey everybody, Nick here, and tonight we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance on this very interesting little knife right here. This is the Lion Steel SR11. So, I'm going to be completely frank with you. I've taken this knife apart before. When I first, was planning to do this, I decided I was going to give it a go off camera, because the SR2, which is in a smaller version of what this is based off of, the SR1, was frankly a circle of hell to take apart. It was terrible. Because it was using Teflon washers and because there was a lot of spring tension keeping these two tines together. This is an integral knife, actually, is probably something I should mention ahead of time. And that's relevant here because that affects how you're able to disassemble and maintain the knife. But anyways, so that's why I did this already. So I'm a little more practiced than you might think. But they're not making it super easy for you. First off, what you're going to need for this disassembly is a Torx T6 and a Torx T8 driver. One for the pivot, one for the stop pin there. So there you go. And we'll start off just by pulling out the pivot here. I'm going to say this guy came just dripping with a white permanent thread locker. So the first time I took this apart, I needed to really use some heat on there to free up that screw. That's ugly. It's unpleasant. It's not a beautiful thing. So always, always, always don't fight that with torque. Fight that with heat. And that'll help unlock this screw and get it out of there. This guy didn't come Loctited, so there shouldn't be a big problem there. Look, integral knives are actually meant to be, or actually usually pretty straightforward in terms of disassembly. And I'm just going to loosen this guy up. I don't need to take this screw out altogether. But anyways, integral knives are supposed to be pretty straightforward in disassembly because all you really need to do is undo the pivot. This is another integral, by the way. Undo the pivot, pop that through, and then you can just pull the blade out and then put it back in after you're done. This knife makes it a little more difficult than you might think. What I'm going to go ahead and do now is use the... I've undone the pivot screw here, and I'm going to use just this little bit here. This is a Torx T7 because it'll go inside the threads here. It won't damage anything. I'm going to unlock the lock bar here with my finger, and then I'm going to use this to try and pop, if I can, the pivot out of there. Beautiful. Okay, so you can see I've popped the pivot through, and I'm just going to push it the rest of the way out of there. Beautiful. So the pivot is now out of this knife, leaving the blade just kind of hanging out here. Now, to get the blade the rest of the way out of there, all you really need to do is pull. But when you pull, you're going to see some extras come with it. And that's kind of what's making this knife a little harder than most integrals to deal with. On a lot of knives, for instance, on this guy, you've just got bearings right up against the titanium. That's something that some people are actually kind of concerned about, because eventually the bearings could wear a little bit of a race in the titanium, which could lead to some back and forth. But with this knife, this is a knife that is made out of aluminum. The handle on this particular model is made of aluminum. And as a result, because it is, they rightfully used stainless steel washers to keep things basically safe. What I'm doing here is just using a Q-tip, and I'm going to go through and just kind of clean out these holes here, removing any gunk, old Loctite and whatnot, because oh my God, did they use a lot of Loctite on that? And just clean that out. Okay, so now this part is all set and done. Like I said, this knife has been cleaned recently, so you're not going to see a whole lot of dirt and gunk in it. Now I'm going to use the use this piece of these are just cleaning swatches, and I'm just going to wipe that clean here. Little bugger. Wipe that clean. Flip it over. Wipe this clean. Case closed. There we go. Case closed. And now I'm going to use my finger and just roll the bearing around on this. And all that's going to do is remove any gunk and oil from that bearing. Come on now. There we go. Bearings pop through. On a knife that you've used a lot where there's been some wear, you'll get a lot more nasty stuff out of there. But for the moment, it's pretty clean. Now I'm going to use my fingers there just to kind of get up inside the pivot here. What we can see here is, well, that there is no ramp for the detent ball, which is fine, I guess. Soak up a little of the booze, clean the inside here, and then just clean these races here. But there's a little recessed pocket for these bearings to sit into, and that's fine. That's well and good. So, there we go. We're actually almost ready to put this guy back together. So, a couple of things to highlight as we're working here. One of the big ones, here, I'll clean this little area off here too. This right here is your detent ball hole, and we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of lubrication up inside there, and just spread a little tiny bit of it onto there, so that way you lubricate the detent ball path. I'm also going to put some lube inside this race here, so that way it will, as I spin this bearing, the bearing will get coated in lubrication, which will speed things up significantly. Action on this knife is actually already pretty good, so I can't argue with that, I suppose. There we go. So in my unboxing video, and I want to make very clear that I'm making this clear. I mean, obviously this knife does come apart, but the reason in my unboxing video why I thought it didn't is because as you look in from the side, what you actually see is this metal washer, which doesn't actually fully recess into the knife blade. To me, that's ugly. I would have liked to have seen the pockets made a little bit deeper so that this washer recesses as well, and things are a little bit tighter. It'll make reassembly much more straightforward. By the way, if you're hearing pops and bangs out there, there's not, it's not like a shooting war out there. It's the day after 4th of July, and I gather some folks have some leftover fireworks. But anyways, as a result, when you looked in on this knife, you could see those little bearings there, and I thought that that was a thick bearing race and that there were milled pockets on the inside, but instead, if we can see, there are no pockets here on the inside of the on the handle there. It's just these bearings and then these bearing races against them. Unfortunately, though, it's still kind of a pain in the neck to put back together. So what you have to do with any integral knife is kind of hold the bearings, and in this case the races as well, as sort of a sandwich, and then slide it in between the handle. So unfortunately, there we go. This is less straightforward because these bearing races want to move around naturally, and they don't want to go into position naturally. If it's a knife where it's just the bearings recessed in there, it's just a question of sandwich and then roll it in there. But on this guy, we have to kind of convince those little bearing races to go back home, and that's not super great. For lack of a better option, I need like a plastic spudger or something. Here, let's try this. I'm going to try using this little, it's the end of a cap, but it's plastic, it won't scratch the metal. And I'm just going to try and push this little washer. Yeah, so there you can see that the little hole for the washer is inside there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can use this little, this is a watch spring bar tool, but it's just more serving as a piece of metal here. So what I hope that I've just done is pulled both washers into rough position. The knife is not going to want to be in its proper position with the pivot and whatnot because its proper position has everything locked up. So there is spring tension working against that. But what that does do is it gets things roughly in the right position. Now what I'm going to do is take my pivot, which is clean, otherwise I would have cleaned it off, and it is not D-shaped in any way, so it's roughly free spinning. I'm going to start sliding it back through here. My goal is just to get everything roughly into position again. So this is tricky because first off the washer needs to be in the right place, and I don't know that it is. No, it is not. Oh, Oh, see, these washers, these bearing races, although I can see why they're very necessary if you're going to make this knife out of aluminum, it just complicates this process way more than relative to any other integral knife. Okay, good. So what you probably just heard there is that the pivot finally slid past that washer. There we go, and now it's seated inside the hole of the blade, there, inside the pivot hole. So now all we got to do is move the other washer on the other side into position. In order for this to fully work, though, what I have to do is depress the lock bar, push it in that direction. That takes some of the tension off of things and allows the pivot to, allows basically the blade to move in a more natural way, which will allow those washers to move. And ideally what's going to happen here is I'm going to shift this washer in just the right direction. Come on, you little bugger. And then suddenly, there you go. What I did is I used my thumb to press down on this lock bar to move it out of the way. That removed some of the tension on the blade, which allowed the pivot to slide the rest of the way through. And now we are back together. Let me just double check real quick that my washers are in position, and indeed they are. Wow, this was way more straightforward the second time around. Also less, it was a long day